Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. Today I am here with Sabrina Guler, and she has quite the story. And actually, she's the perfect example of the person that I want you to become if that's what you desire, because she started in New York City with $10. And a couple years later, she's grown a business into $85 million. And so I'm so excited to have you. And Sabrina, why don't you introduce yourself even further?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I like to say I'm an entrepreneur first, but I like to say that I've really, underneath the hood of all of that, I've really mastered the art of transformation and rebirth and really stepping out of what was my circumstance at the time. So yes, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a few businesses. My first business, I was so lucky to have found what others might have seen as overnight success, but for me was really a 10-year run. And recently, I just started a few other businesses. So I like to say I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a dog mom, and I'm definitely, I definitely advocate for female entrepreneurs. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, because sometimes people think overnight success, like, how did you do it in 2 years? That's crazy. I've been doing it for 5 years, or I've been doing it for 10 years, or I've been doing it for however long, and nothing's happening. So let's start at the beginning and what happened.
So very, very beginning. So I'm originally from the East Coast, and I'm so grateful that I had two incredible parents who are still together. But they represented what I like to call the American dream. So I grew up with two immigrant parents who came here from their respective countries without speaking any English, and they built a life for themselves. They had my sister and we grew up understanding what risk-taking was and what a dream was, what it meant to have a dream. And growing up in that environment, I always knew that having a big vision was the inception of doing anything big in life. And my parents, with my sister and I, we were so lucky to have a very sheltered life up until I was around 15, 16 years old. And then my father actually lost his business. My parents lost their house. And this was during the 2008 financial crash. So my family was one of many that had really had a very destructive time during that era. And what happened was what we once knew as shelter and safety was entirely ripped away from us, like quite literally overnight. And I remember at that time, I was operating subconsciously, right? I was young, my brain wasn't fully developed, but I remember thinking that, I needed to take over and be responsible for my own financial stability. And that was my reality at that point. What everyone, the kids my age were going to school and picking their college and picking their freshman year and doing all these things. And I was like, okay, how do I help my parents put food on the table? And so that became my reality at a very young age. And I'll never forget, my mom has always been my mom has been a huge influence in my life. And the one thing she always told me as a kid, despite all the chaos that we were going through as a family, was to think really big. And I remember me being my delusional 16-year-old self. The next 2 years were really rough, but I always knew that I was capable of more. I like to start there because that one thread carried throughout my entire career. And I do business coaching and I coach a lot of people in their businesses, and they always say, well, I want to do the podcast. I want to do this. I'm confused. I don't know which way to go. I don't know where to go, because women are very dynamic, right? We're very dynamic beings. We can do a lot of things at once, which make us amazing moms and teachers and leaders and daughters and, entrepreneurs. But the one common thread that I find most successful people have is they have a vision and they trust themselves. And so I like to start there because that was really the one thing that held it all together for me throughout a very difficult, strenuous 10 years. And so anyway, to continue the story, I made a commitment to myself. I was like, I'm gonna do really big things. And I remember I was very young. And so I moved to New York City with $10 in a suitcase. I lived in, awful circumstances. I was in an apartment with 10 other women. I was a
Wow.
model living out of, with an apartment with rats. Like, I had done, the true ramen noodle life at a very young age. And I remember, despite being around alcohol and drugs and, essentially chaos, I had always been very focused on the wrong things, but still focused. I was still very driven. So anyway, I went through a horrible heartbreak at 20, and I packed my bags and I moved to Arizona. And I remember still having this very big inner knowing that I was supposed to carry through. And so I put myself through school. I started a community college. I paid for that myself. I put myself through Arizona State University. I got my degree in like sales. I don't even remember. It was nothing that actually ended up carrying through. And I graduated. I wanted, for me, I was like, money means stability. And money means safety, because that's what was my reality at a young age, right? It was ripped away from us, and then we didn't feel safe anymore. So I went carrying on through big corporate, and um, again, I have many stories landing big jobs and big salaries at a young age, and a lot of people throughout my career have asked me, well, how did you do it? And I was like, because I just believed I could. And I studied the people around me. I reverse engineered everything in my life. So I'd be like, okay, the people that work for Apple do these things. And so I'm going to do these things. I'm going to master them. And then I'm going to go to Apple and see if they take me in. And that was quite literally what had happened. I had a sales degree at a non-Ivy League school, and through a lot of tenacity, through like 15 failed interviews, I got my dream job at Apple, and I was making $250,000 doing that for a few years. And to kind of fast forward, because my story is so long, but to fast forward, during COVID, I just had this bug in me, and I'm just gonna, I'll state this because I feel like a lot of people need permission to be this. And so I'm always the permission giver for this. But like, we are allowed to do many things in life. We are allowed to grow out of things. We are allowed to switch out of careers and businesses and things. You have full permission to go and reinvent yourself. And so, because I have so many highs and lows in my story of all the things that I've done, yes, I got my dream job at Apple. I was there for a few years. Yes, I had the bug in me to want something more. And so I did. And so I started a business in 2020. Again, all the hard things that I went through in my life, that was like the finale for me at that point, for me to take all the things that I learned and apply it to a business. And so my very first business turned into a pretty large 8-figure business. I ended up in private equity. I raised money for real estate, and I had a co-founder with me, a business partner. And so today we do operate an 8-figure business, but it really came from that belief that there was more. So I'll pause there.
No, I could listen to it because I love stories. And I think we're kind of similar like that, because when I was working for corporate as well, I would sit there and I'd watch every single person in that, like the higher ups, and okay, if I ever get in this position, I will not do this, or I will do this. And so we ended up being able to run successful colleges because of that. And I think that that's the start, when you are aware of what's around you, the good, the bad, the ugly, that what's needed. So kudos to you for that you did that. And so you get into your business, and what are some of the challenges that you found as it started to take off?
Oh man. So I will say, so one of the things, there are many phases in business. I like to say that, and I teach this a lot in my own programs, but like, when you have an idea, when an idea comes to you, you are the parent of this idea. Your business has a spirit, your business has a life of its own. And as a founder or as a partner, you carry that to life. You bring it to where it needs to go. And I think the thing that I experienced, having what many people go after in business, which is to raise a lot of money, to get a lot of customers, and to be profitable, because that's what we look for in a business. That happens for people over many years. That happened to my partner and I within 15 months. And so all the growth that someone goes through over the course of 5 years, we condensed in such a short period of time. And that came with a lot of very difficult lessons, because when a business takes life, when it takes shape like that so quickly, you are not, we love to have this idea that we have an agenda and that we have this plan. But when something spirals out like that in a good way, right, it takes over you, and you have to grow at the rapid in which the business is growing. And that sounds like, great, that's a great problem. You have money, you have all these things coming in. But the thing is, with our business model wasn't, to the fact that we raised money. So to give some people context, we raised a fund. So we took money in, and then we would buy assets and we would rent them out. And the thing with that is that is a distribution-based business. So as a founder, you eat last. And you also need a lot of infrastructure to support a very labor-intensive business. And so we went through a couple of phases. We raised a lot of money in a short period of time. So that in itself puts a lot of weight on you to take responsibility and accountability of how you responsibly allocate that money. And then that rolled into phase 2, which was, okay, now we need to execute. We need to buy the right things. We need to manage the right things. We need to design and furnish and implement those things, right, in a physical aspect. And so that requires management and hiring and really crafting a culture of a business for people to believe your vision and come in. And then we also had a third phase, which was to maintain those properties and to also figure out where the business was going next. Because one thing is, you start a business and then you're like, okay, this is great. Like, I have this plan. And then the plan changes. Your audience might change. Your product might change. You might realize that you're not really as profitable as you thought you were going to be. And so all those things require you to stay very open, to put your ego aside, because sometimes we think that things need to go one way and they don't. And so that resistance, that push that a lot of us feel in the business to be like, that can't be true, or I don't want to help those people, or I wanted my business to have this aesthetic, and your business is like, hey, we're going this way and you're stuck behind. Those are very difficult lessons that I was forced to learn in a very short period of time. But circling back to when I first answered the question, I always share this in my coaching. I say, it's because your business has a life of its own and you are not the business. The business has a separate identity from you. And I think for those jumping into personal brands or solopreneur businesses, that's a very hard pill to swallow, because your growth is in that pill typically.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and a lot of people, you mentioned you had a partner. How did you connect with that partner, and what made you decide to partner with them?
It was kind of like a soul partnership, in the sense that it was so easy. We met, had right goals, right values, right place, right time. And we're still partners today. I don't run that business actively anymore. I'm working on other projects. He now runs that business full time. But I will say partnership is very difficult. We had a very synchronistic partnership where everything aligned. We were on the same page with a lot of things, and it was still very hard. So, similar to a marriage, similar to picking the right partners, it's a choice every day. And you are making very big decisions that need to be aligned with the right values. So we met through TikTok. He's married, he has kids. We had very different lifestyles at that time, but we had the same goals and the same values for the business. But again, when business gets hard, or when the two of you see solving problems differently, that is where great communication needs to come in, and all these interpersonal skills that we tend to forget around sensitive subjects like money and vision and projection.
That's crazy. You met on TikTok. So how long before you decided to create a business? How long did it take?
It really wasn't very long. I mean, to give some context, when I was leaving my job at Apple in 2020, and it wasn't really a choice that I made. Apple was like, hey, you need to come back to the office. I was living in Phoenix at the time. I was living in Phoenix. I wasn't really supposed to be living here, but it was like the COVID everyone was somewhere else kind of life, you know? And it was right, I was working on some top like secret projects at the time where I couldn't just like be at home working on hardware. I was working on like the glasses at Apple and a couple things that just hadn't been out in the world. And so they needed me to come back to the office to work on those things. And I just couldn't I couldn't commit to that. So I decided to stay here in Phoenix where I'm based now. And I just felt like I had thrown an 8-year career away because that was the choice that I made. And I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. I had been planning to start my own business, but there's one thing to plan it and another thing to be like, okay, go, you have 2 months. And so at the time I was posting on TikTok, which by the way, TikTok was like my secret haven at the time because TikTok had started in 2019. So we had only been a year in and everyone thought TikTok was stupid. And I remember I like loved TikTok. I was like, okay, no one knows me on here. No one can see what I'm doing. You know, me being in corporate, I was always very aware of like who was watching my stuff. I like to feel private. And the funny thing is like hadn't actively posted anything on social for probably like 7 years. And I started posting on TikTok about what I was doing. I was on Airbnb. I was doing, it was more of like a hobby at that time. And of course, my like third post on TikTok like hit 500,000 views. And it was like every other post was like going viral. And I remember I got a lot of hate on those videos. And I remember feeling like, whoa, like this is so intense, you know, like I hadn't posted anything in years. And here I was posting a couple things at the time. And so anyway, I met my partner through a TikTok video. And it was right at the time when like he had a background in doing all this. And so it was right at the time where I felt like I needed to push my foot on the gas to find a business idea. And Apple was like, hey, you got 60 days to like return your stuff and make a decision. And so it was very quick to answer your question. Like we had this, I already knew what I kind of wanted to do, but I didn't know how to put an infrastructure or how to make it profitable at the time. And he had a background that kind of fit with that. And so anyway, that's how we met through TikTok.
That's crazy. So looking back now, would you have done things differently, starting your business, especially with a partner, or would you not?
You know, it's so interesting. I'm now, so my business partner and I, that was our one business that we started. And then he went off and created multiple businesses from that larger business, like a construction company and a few other things. And at the time, I decided I really wanted to focus on women. I had been in a private equity world teaching a lot of men how to invest, and I had learned so much from that space, and I'm so grateful for it. And I learned a lot of difficult lessons from my time there that I feel like I teach back a lot now, just because there are a lot of things that I emotionally processed during that time, which no one talks about these sides of business because people are like, yeah, the structure and all the things, but like business is hard because it's an extension of you, you know? And so I grew so much in that 3-4 year period. So would I do anything differently? No. For the sake of knowing my purpose now, giving back to women and being a coach and focusing on a different side of business, absolutely not. But would I have partners again? Yes, I would. I mean, I still do. He still is my partner. But I think especially as women, and I'll say this again, women are very dynamic. We emotionally process things a lot faster, and we are very intuitive beings. You can smell growth as a woman. Like you can smell that something's coming like months before it happens. And so that was always me. And so I find that I would have partners again, but I feel like it would have to be very congruent with my growth, you know? And so, yeah, I think like anything in life, I don't look at anything like a regret. I look at everything like a lesson learned, especially now with me doing a lot of giving back.
Right. So you've created Intuitive CEO or the Intuitive CEO. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so my brand right now is mission driven towards women. And me being in the private equity space for so many years, I used to take a lot of it. I was looking for business advice, and I was looking for business advice that was congruent to where I was as a woman. And I never found the resources that I needed. And so I made a lot of my own resources. So, for example, a question that I find is very common is like, well, what does it mean to be a high achiever as a woman, but also keep your identity as a woman, as a mom, as a partner, and as all these other things? And is there a give and take, right? And so I found that to be in my life where I wanted to keep my identity as that. I wanted to grow as a CEO, as a founder, as a partner, also in different business verticals. Like, I had I'm still a partner at that private equity company. We had a real estate business, but now my business now is very online driven, online marketing. And so I learned a lot about the online space. So I think for me, a huge driver for my program and my coaching program, and essentially it's a cohort, is to build a business program on how to start or scale a business, but from the lens of being a high achieving woman, right? How do you listen to your body? How do you find the resources that feel good to you? What does it mean to be authentic in your own business? How do you lead a business? How do you deal with difficult personalities in a business? And so that's what my program is based. That's where it is a driver in terms of my own mission.
Love that. Fantastic. So mindset's a tough thing, because you talked about how in 2008, your family lost so much. And so there was poverty, there was not unsafety. So how do you go from the mindset of poor, really, to multi-millionaire, right? And or your businesses. And how do you overcome that mindset? Because imposter syndrome was real for many people. So how do you overcome that?
I think imposter syndrome is so interesting because I always tell people this, I'm like, it never changes. So, to give some perspective, like, yes, I had this private equity company, and I never knew that I was capable of even creating that, right? But a part of me knew that I was capable of more. And it doesn't matter what that more meant for me, but I always knew that wherever I was always thinking bigger and I was always hungry to learn. And I think when we focus on the how, because that's where people get stuck, like, well, I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to get there. That doesn't make any sense. I'm only going to believe what is in my 3D reality and what is currently present today. And I think that's where we go wrong in our belief systems. And that's where we go wrong in terms of what we believe we are capable in attracting opportunity. Fun fact, yesterday on my podcast, I spoke to someone who does money healing and focuses on scarcity with money. And she was telling me how she's had thousands of clients who were in debt, females who were in debt, who have always been in a cycle of debt. And she was saying how having a scarcity mindset and debt, the prerequisite to releasing debt is to overcome scarcity mindset. And she was saying how most of her clients who were $250,000 in debt in like law school or whatever, when they opened that channel up within themselves, their plan, when they got realistic, like, okay, I'm going to plan to pay off this debt. And for the next 3 years, I'm going to allocate $2,000 or whatever that number looks like to pay this off, right? She says that for like literally like 90% of her clients, most of them, once they opened up that channel of releasing that scarcity, and even though they had a plan in place, that plan got cut by like 2 years just because they had that belief system. And so, as woo as this sounds, or, if you roll your eyes at this, it's the truth. It's just law, where instead of attaching yourself to, but how, I don't know, but how, you need to attach yourself to, I'm already this in another reality. Like, this is my identity in another reality. And I'll add one more thing, because I talk about this a lot, again, with my own clients, is like, and I'll do like this mini exercise with the audience, but when you want to be a different version of yourself, a more successful version of yourself, and you picture yourself in that reality, you're only picturing it in that one scenario. So maybe you're like, I want to be like a 7-figure public speaker. And so you picture yourself on the podium speaking and, your book deal or whatever, and you have that vision. But the reality is that version of you is different in the grocery store, at the bank, with your partner, with, we're driving the car, how she responds to triggers, how she responds to emails, right? Or like her QuickBooks account, like whatever that looks like. And so I say it starts today, and it starts in your micro decisions, because you are not what you do sometimes, you are what you do all the time. And so that is how you get out of imposter syndrome, is you swallow it, because yes, it feels cringe because you're not that, but you do that in the micro decisions, in how you eat, in how you react to life, so that when you are in front of people, you don't feel like an imposter, because you are that every day in how you are viewing your reality, you know?
Mhm. No, I laughed. I'm glad I wasn't on camera at that point, because I wasn't laughing at you or what. I was laughing because this week I actually, because that is one of my goals. Like, I have my little book deal, and
Oh,
I want to speak on stages, like that's, but not. I want to speak for a different reason, which we're not going to get into. But I remember going to the bank, like, because I'm a hard money lender, and this guy paid me off. So I had to go to the bank and notarize this letter and send it via FedEx back to the title company so I'd release the lien off this house, right? Okay, I hate doing those stupid little errands, right? But to him, that's really important. But for me, I'm like, oh, to take, and so I had to break it down like, okay, it's only 15 minutes. It's not going to take me really long. Let's go do this, because I had a whole lot of other things to do. And so I remember, like, I don't want to do this. So I literally went in my, I call them my pajama pants. They're not, but that pants that you wear around the house. I'm actually in them right now. Super comfy, holy, but, and then I had this big sweatshirt that was completely oversized. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm not getting dressed. I'm just going to go to the bank like this. And I did, right? And so then I start thinking, okay, if I were to be in my whole self, where if I'm like this person that's on stages doing all this stuff, if someone were to see me dressed like this, what would they say? And part of me, like, I don't care. But the other part's like, I need to start dressing the way that I want to portray myself. And so it just hit a chord with me that you said that, because it is the baby steps to get you where you want to be. Like, if you, me specifically, have gained 50 pounds, like, I'm not going to lose 50 pounds overnight. It's going to take some time. And it's the baby steps that you talk about. And that's the same thing with a business. That's the same thing with anything you want to see or change in your life. You got to start with the micro. So I love that advice. It's fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. And we're always subconsciously throwing out our identity to other people around us. Fun fact, I know we're coming up on time, but I took a class in June about regulating your nervous system. And I went to a 4-day seminar with hundreds of doctors, people who study the brain, the body, chiropractors, all this stuff. And it was so interesting, because as much as you hear the woo and manifestation, all these things, if you take it into the body really quick, for those who are kind of skeptical, your body as a baby, your body today as an adult, is always scanning. Like, your nervous system is always scanning subconsciously without people speaking. It's like our nonverbal language, because we're always studying for danger. And when you feel like someone is really cringy, like they're being an imposter, like, oh, that person's so salesy, or that person's so ick, and you don't know why, it's because a part of your nervous system doesn't feel like they are aligned with what they're saying, and you feel that, right? And so that is how we are constantly portraying out to the world, right? Like, when you want to date someone amazing and you meet this guy of your dream, whatever that looks like, are you ready on a nervous system level? Or are you giving that out there from a nonverbal perspective, that you are embodying that identity? And so I like to say that, because it's also very physical as much as it is like in the woo.
Yeah. And we could get into that. Like, I 100% agree with you. And I did that experiment this year with my real estate business, where I wasn't doing a lot of business, but like I had enough, but I wasn't like trying to push it and increase, because I'm working on other things. So I'm hiring people to join my team so that they can do that. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like 15 clients and I have one under contract. And I'm like, okay, I need to stop saying that. I need to say, I have all these 15 clients, it's going to hit, everything's good. And no joke, within like 2 weeks, all of a sudden, boom, 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 like all these contracts. And I'm like, all right, once again, the woo-woo stuff is really, really true. Because if you start acting like it, like instead of just keeping those people on the line, let's push them towards it. And hey, you really want to have a house? This is the time to do it. And or they come to me. And so it's really crazy to see how the manifestations, we can talk about it person after person, but think about this, any listeners or you, when you start thinking about somebody like, oh, I should call this person, or hey, this person pops in your head. Do you notice that they'll call you, or like you'll call them right away and they're like, oh, I was just thinking about you. That happens all the time. And so you talk about intuition, and we didn't really even get into that, but oh my gosh, that is a real thing. I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, I know our time is short. So if people, and specifically our listeners, if they wanted to find you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty active. You can go to sabrinaguler.com. My Instagram, Sabrina M for Marie Guler. And then I'm on all the things. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm everywhere. So if you Google me, you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much for being on our show. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And moms, go out and make it a great day and really listen to yourself, have the intuition that you need, and don't be afraid to take the big steps and think big. So Sabrina, great advice and great information. Thank you. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.